Just quickly before we get into this review, I am super excited to let you know that 2 new art books I created are available now worldwide. The books are Roller Derby Girl Gang, an art anthology, and She's a Wildcat, The Art of Candy. Since you're watching this channel, you probably appreciate a good art book, and so I would be incredibly grateful if you'd consider checking them out. Instagram is the best place to go to find out more about the books, or just follow the top link in the description to find out where you can order a copy. In this video, we're going to be taking a look through The Art of the Incredibles, and this isn't really going to be the usual objective critique of the book itself. I'll still point out potential areas of dissatisfaction, but there's actually not a whole lot to say on that front. Instead, how much this book appeals to you will just come down to personal tastes and whether or not you like the art you're seeing. So while your eyeballs make that decision, hopefully your earballs will allow me a more subjective ramble about the art than I usually do, which I'm excited about because this is easily my favorite Pixar art book, despite the fact that I don't think it's an especially well done art book. But that doesn't matter compared to just how fond I am of the very classy art direction and how completely I adore the style used for most of the art, which is that sort of minimalist, mid-century modern cartoon style made up of strong shapes and silhouettes, and sort of runs the gamut from Sol Bass graphic design to more illustrative Mary Blair style. I don't actually know what the technical terms and distinctions are for this style, but I just use the terms mid-century modern or retro modern, but just so you know that in those cases, modern doesn't actually refer to present day. Typically it does have a real retro vibe, like in this case, because of the style's prevalence in the 50s and 60s, but you still see it, or at least an evolution of it, in art today. Editorial and vector illustrations bear a lot of similarities to mid-century commercial art. Many children's book illustrations still very much inspired by that Little Golden Book style, and especially in animation and backgrounds for everything from the Flintstones to the Powerpuff Girls was really defined by the minimalistic stylized art and animation that UPA were making at the time. And there always seems to be some evidence of it in visual development for feature animation. There'll be some artists and pieces that harken back to this retro modern style. But the reason I like this Incredibles book so much is that there's just a lot more of it, because it's very much the bedrock that the Incredibles visual aesthetic and world is built on, and it really informs the final look of the movie a lot more than it does in other films. I love how it's set in such a subtly stylized but undefined time period. I know in the movie it specifically denotes 1962, but I remember an interview with Brad Bird from a few years ago where he said that was just incidental rather than literal, and that for the whole development of the movie their intention was to make it feel like what someone in the 60s would think the near future would look like. So there's super advanced technology, but the mid-century aesthetics and architecture is still predominant. And I really love this idea of it being out of time and things being more subtle and evocative rather than overstated and literal, as opposed to going all in and making it a cliche period piece like Far Out, we're in the 60s man, or Beep Boop, we're in the future human. And this idea of giving something a certain feeling or mood is also why I really like the art. A lot of concept art and art books focused on being almost a literal design blueprint for what should appear on screen, and of course that's an essential part of making an animation, art that is a design tool. But it's not necessarily the most interesting to look at compared to the visual development work that is more inspirational, that is meant to convey a sense of feeling more than anything. And I think with this book, that's a lot clearer. I can look at it and see how the feeling captured in the art translated successfully to screen, if not literally. And yeah, there are plenty more standard, less stylized pieces and traditional animation sketches that you'd expect from an animation art book, but this one does seem more defined by its retro-modern influence. For me, the real standout artists are Lou Romano, whose work defines everything I've said so far about why I love this style and is the biggest reason to get this book. There's a 4-page gatefold of his color script, which is just amazing, and there's also Teddy Newton, who contributes some really interesting pieces through collage, especially his character designs, which I don't recall ever seeing anything like it in animation concept art before. In fact, I don't even think I like it in and of itself, But going back to what I was saying about the art being more impressionistic than literal, it's perfect for this movie, for this modern style, strong, minimalist shapes, powerful silhouettes. And I think these exaggerated elements and bold silhouettes are so fitting for the superhero theme. It actually reminds me a lot of Batman the Animated Series, which is obviously a lot darker, but a lot of the visual cues seem very similar. Also, considering this is a superhero movie, there really isn't anything reminiscent of comic book art, with the exception of only one piece, which some people might find surprising or disappointing, so it's worth pointing that out. Although, despite technically being a superhero movie, it's pretty clear that both the art and story are much more influenced by the spy movies that became popular during that 1960s period. One thing you might notice in the book is that there's not much design evolution for the characters, which is usually a bad thing in art books, but in this book, at least they actually kind of account for it by mentioning that there wasn't much change in the characters from how they were initially conceived. It's also mentioned in the book that they had to reduce the amount of 2D artwork in order for things to be more efficient or something. Whether that's acceptable or very disappointing will be up to you. And now that we're onto the subject of the text, I would describe it as being okay. It's nothing special, I could take it or leave it, but I am happy it's there. It's mostly a standard commentary from the filmmakers giving little insights on a range of things, but this range is something I would have liked to be a little more limited. There's a lot of stuff about story and technical 3D animation stuff, and most of it is super interesting, but it feels more like it should be in an art and making of book. Whereas because this is an art book, I would have liked more of the commentary to focus on the art, specifically about inspirations and style and such, sort of the stuff I've been talking about in this video, except from people who actually know what they're talking about and not my uninformed drivel. In fact, in recording this, I felt pretty frustrated by my lack of artistic knowledge and terminology and not able to describe things as accurately as I should. But anyway, there definitely is a bunch of art-related commentary in here, but I feel like as a book on the art, the text could have focused more on that rather than the movie as a whole. But this isn't really an actual criticism, more just wishful thinking because I am so interested in it. In fact, really the only thing I don't like about this book is that even though the quality of the art is impeccable, the quantity, however, is very peccable. Like most Chronicle books, it's well designed and attractive, but once you start examining it, you notice that it's also very sparse, with maybe only 2 images per page on average, which makes it look like an exhibition catalog. And this is something that most Pixar art books struggle with, even The Art of the Incredibles 2, and it just feels so empty compared to many of the DreamWorks and Disney animation art books, which are much more impressively and creatively designed and have a lot more text and images, which is weird since Disney owns Pixar and both have their art books made by Chronicle. And so it's a shame to see how easy it would have been to fit a whole lot more into this book, and an especial shame considering how much I like the art that is in here. Obviously, we can't change that, but as it stands, this book still contains some of the most beautiful, stylish, and inspiring concept art I've seen.